My name's Quita and I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you ladies tonight my story and my heart. I was the youngest of 3 children. My parents were both ministers, so I grew up in a very protected environment, very safe environment. Nothing bad ever happened to me. I didn't have a perfect life, but I had a pretty good life. We were a middle-class family. I grew up singing and playing the piano in my dad's church. Church was all I knew. I didn't have any traumatic things happen. It was just a very nice childhood. I remember at 6 years old being in one of my dad's little white frame churches. And do any of you remember that song, into my heart, come into my heart, Lord Jesus? And I remember the day, I was 6 years old, and I remember bowing my head and singing that little song. And I knew at that moment that Jesus was in my heart. And I knew he would never leave me, but I didn't know the extent to how I would need to lean on him in my life. When I was 16, my parents decided to move from Texas to Arkansas. That's where they had both grown up. So my dad was ready to retire, and it was just the 3 of us. I was from Wichita Falls, Texas, which was a decent-sized city, and so it was a culture shock, so to speak. So we moved there, and at first it was kind of fun because I was the new girl in town, so I got a few of the boys looking at me, which was real important at 17. And of course that didn't last too long, but we enjoyed living there and had a fun circle of friends in church. And it was there that I would meet a man that I would fall in love with. And it happened when I was 18, and it just so happened he was a preacher, which is what everybody had always said. I bet you're going to marry a preacher. And I was fine with that because I was the song and dance girl, so that's all I'd ever known was church. And all I had ever wanted to be was a mom, a wife, and a child of God. I mean, that was my big desire, was to be that. So we got married on my 19th birthday, which is extremely young. Life was wonderful. We were happy. He was a minister. I was the music girl. And we had a really happy life. Now, we lived in Pine Ridge, Arkansas. Anybody heard of that? Pine Ridge, Arkansas has maybe 25 people, if you count the dogs and cows and cats. I mean, nobody lives there. But we did. We lived on a farm. I was actually a farmer's wife. It may be hard for you to picture, but I drove a tractor and baled hay, and it was fun. In 1984, we had our first son, Charlie. And he was 8 pounds, beautiful, brown hair, brown eyes, just gorgeous. In 1986, we began pastoring our first church, which was in Odin, Arkansas. Now, Odin, Arkansas has about 245 population. And I'm pretty sure that includes some of the farm animals, too. I mean, it's pretty out there. There's one school, and everybody goes there from kindergarten to 12th grade. And this year, I think they had 23 graduates. So I'm talking small town. We were the pastors of one of the bigger churches, which I think one Sunday we hit 100. But, that was a pretty big deal for that area. And so we loved our church. My husband would preach, and I would sing, and it was awesome. Life was just really good. In this small town, I have to set the picture for you. There's one gas station where you could buy, now I'm talking way 20 plus years ago, you could buy everything from dog food to a hairbrush. You just pay triple price, but you could get everything in this little store. that you needed until you could get to town. That's what we called it. When are you going to town? That was the big city of Mina. Okay, everybody knows everything about you. You know everything about them, whether you want to or not. That was the town we pastored in. In 1987, a year later, we had our second little son, Caleb, who was blonde and brown-eyed and just as cute as Charlie. Precious little boys. And once again, life just got better. We ministered together. We had these perfect little baby boys. I was able to stay at home, which is what I'd always wanted to do, and raise them, and I loved it. I was doing the job of my dreams, being a mom and a wife. You know, sometimes things can feel like everything's okay, but they're really not. And so, to my shock, and I can say 100% surprise, in 1989, my husband told me the day before our 7th anniversary that he no longer wanted to be married to me. And this completely caught me off guard. I had always thought that people got divorced because they were unhappy. You know, both sides were just miserable. So when they got divorced, it was a relief to everybody. I didn't know that sometimes you got divorced. I mean, I was 25 years old. And so I was devastated. I did a lot of begging, groveling, crying, bawling, begging, all the things that you might say, I would never do that. But you'd be surprised what you do when your family's falling apart and you're desperate to hold it together. Well, it didn't do any good. So I fell into a deep, dark hole of depression. It's a deep, dark tunnel, and I'm sure some of you have been in that tunnel of depression for whatever reason. When you're in a tunnel of depression, there's no light at the end of it. It's filled up with tears. I cried literally. I didn't cry for hours. I cried for days because my heart was so broken. Divorce is one of the most humiliating things that you can go through. It takes away all your self-worth. It's just, any of you that have been through it know it strips you of everything. I was 25 years old, and I felt like I was 125 years old. I felt like nobody loved me. And you have to remember, I was in this town, this small town. We were the ministers. We were the pastors. And so we were the talk at everybody's dinner table. I mean, we were the big news in Odin, Arkansas. Now, I had kept a lot of my family who lived out of state at this time. You know, I didn't talk much because I kept thinking, he's going to take me back, he's going to love me again, and they're going to hate him. So I can't let them know that he's doing this. I wanted to protect him. And so I didn't tell them, and so I buried myself in this depression. You know, one of the things the devil loves to do to us ladies is make us hide in that tunnel. Because once you get out into the light and you tell one person, especially a person of prayer, once that little bit of light can come on, it sheds away so much darkness. So I held it in, and it just, I can still feel that heaviness that I felt in my heart. Now, Jesus had never left my heart. I had never, wandered off into sin, and I wasn't perfect, but I hadn't done anything bad. I wasn't being punished for anything. And God was, Jesus was still there. But I had gotten so much stuff in this tunnel, this depression, that I couldn't see that he was still there. And I doubted everything. I doubted everything, who I was. But I never lost my faith in God. Now, sometimes all I could do prayer-wise was just sing. And sometimes I couldn't sing. I would just play the piano. and I would cry. And I know my little boys would come in and they'd say, "Mama, please don't cry anymore." Because, they were 2 and 5. And I would try not to, because I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want them to see me like that. But, when you're so depressed, you just can't pull yourself up by your bootstrings and shake it off. So I would try, and they would cry. They, at night they'd want their dad to come home, and I couldn't fix it for him. And I wanted him to come home. And so we cried. We cried a lot. Now, in this amount of time, I need to talk to you ladies a week to explain the depth of my depression, and I obviously don't have that much time. But I will tell you that over time, and the help of a Christian doctor, I was able to start functioning at a bare minimum. I was able to be a mom, at least to my little boys. And I began to come out of my house a little bit more. For one thing, the reality hit me. I got to make a living, okay? I have no money. I have nothing in the refrigerator but ice cubes. And they need to eat. I got married straight out of high school, so I had no job, career to fall back on. So I came to the reality pretty quick. Okay, Quita, got to get a job. So I thought, well, this is okay. It was one of my better days. I'm feeling like I have a little bit of hope. So I thought, I bet I'll go to Mina, the big city, and maybe I could get a job at the bank, because then I could, wear cute outfits and have good self-esteem. And, well, the bank didn't need anybody, so I didn't get that job. So I went to several places, and I found myself pulled up in front of Sonic Drive-In in a small town. Now, you gals, think back with me now. This was over 20 years ago, when it was not cool to work at Sonic if you were over 16. I know now you see older women working there, but at the time I was 26. I felt like 126. And they hired me. I'll never forget the guy saying, "Can you start tonight?" Like at 5, and this was 3. And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't show up that night. I just couldn't bring myself. I didn't have pride, but I just kept thinking, God, surely not Sonic. Everybody's going to see me. And because, this is a small town. We're the big talk, even though we're in Mina. Everybody at Mina knew the Odin pastor had left his wife. And it was just very difficult. So the next day I went back to Sonic, and I said, okay, I didn't show up for work last night, but I still need the job. And they were desperate. So they're like, sure. Can you come tonight? So I did. It was January. It was super cold. And I remember it was me and 2 or 3 16-year-old girls. And I just remember crying, not because I thought I was better than that. It was nothing to do with that. It was just part of that whole humiliation of rejection. So I picking up trash off the lot after people had left, and I just thought, this can't be God. And the Lord spoke to my heart and said, if you will just give me a chance. Sorry. I will show you. Yes, I still cry giving this testimony. They're tears of joy. He did. I was not only the oldest car hop that had ever worked at Sonic, which, that's all I could think of was I'm going to have a record somewhere of the oldest car hop in Sonic history. Thank you. Even though I was all of 26 years old. Wow. But I also became the highest tipped car hop that had ever worked there. So I made more money in my tips. I got a $20 tip one time, which back in those days was a lot of money. I made more money in my tips than I did in my my tips and my salary than I could have ever made at the bank. And I got to pick my hours. I got to be in the outside, which is wonderful for depression. I was forced to face people I didn't want to face, people that were staring at me from their cars, feeling sorry for me, discussing me. There she is. I wonder what happened. I wonder what the real story is. And then sometimes I would take the tray out, and my ex-husband would be at the lot where I was taking the tray. Now, I'm not that good. I would turn around and go find a 16-year-old and say, take it. I knew there wasn't a tip in that one for me, so I didn't go. But, the Lord taught me a lot of things in that Sonic. He taught me how to trust Him when you think you're not in the plan that in your mind is perfect. In my mind, Sonic was not part of the plan. But in God's mind, it was exactly where I needed to be. And I grew to love that place. They offered me the fountain girl position or whatever, and I couldn't take it because I'd lose all my tips. So, and some funny things happen there too. When you're single, everybody's got somebody they want to fix you up with. You know that. And this had been a few months, so people were like, feeling sorry for me. Quita hasn't had a date. The divorce is final. I hear he's moved on. And I had begged and begged and begged, and it was obvious that he was done. And so, the funny thing was people would say, okay, now they had a cousin or an uncle or a second cousin that had an uncle. I don't know. They sent me people up there to check out at Sonic that I'm not sure what they thought I would see in them. But I was not interested. So, but I worked there, and then the next thing that needed to happen in my life was housing, because I couldn't afford to live in my house. And so a minister's wife helped me, and she said, I think we need to get you in government housing. I'm like, okay, whoa, I don't want to do that. Well, I didn't have a lot of options. I worked at Sonic. I had no money. And so she took me, and we signed up, and that was another very humiliating process. So I signed up. I think I signed up for food stamps the same day and was approved for all of it. Shortly after, they told me there was a waiting list. You probably won't get anything for a few weeks. Well, I needed something like yesterday. So I prayed. A lot of people prayed with me, and the next day they called and said, we have this little duplex open. It was $37 a month, all the bugs you wanted free, and there was lots of them. It was a cute little yard with a clothesline. I had to hang out all the clothes, and I had a bunch of interesting neighbors. Most of them were elderly. I had a couple who were questionable as to what they did for a living. I'm thinking maybe drugs. But for the most part, there were little elderly people surrounding my little duplex. And they kind of became my parents, my grandparents to my little boys. And they took us, we'd sit on the porch, stuff that I never would have thought I would do at 26 years old. But we sat out on the porch, and just, it was very calming to me. And it was there that my little boys learned to play again. And I still would have those times where I would just go and I'd be crying. And I'd usually go in the bathroom, and I know Hazel was one of the neighbors, and she'd tell me, she said, now Quita, Charlie came over here yesterday and said his mama was back in the bathroom crying and wanted me to pray for you. So they were very aware, that their mom was hurting. But the sad days the better days started outweighing the sad days. So instead of crying for days, I would cry for maybe a half a day. Then I'd have to get up, put my Sonic shirt on, face the world. And I learned to be strong through Christ. And it was at this time, there was a little bit of light in the end of my tunnel of depression. And it was the light of Jesus. He had never left me or forsaken me. I had just had so much sadness built up. And I know depression hurts regardless of the reason. Maybe you feel it for another reason. But I'm telling you, you can't walk it along alone, because that's the lie of the enemy. You have to have somebody help you, pray for you. Just shed the light on it. That's the first step. No, it wasn't an instant fix. I was sad for many, many months. But God was always there, and He helped me. It was in the government housing that there was this dilapidated little swing set that I probably at this stage of my life would not let my kids get on, but then I did. I let them swing. And Caleb, he was 3, and he still is my song guy. He loves to write music and sing. So you have to picture now, he's completely blonde. I mean, like towhead blonde, big brown eyes, and he's got the most southern Arkansas accent you could hear anywhere. It was adorable. So he would swing and he would sing this song that he made up, which I knew was a prayer. And it was, "I want my daddy to come home." And he would sing it over and over. The higher he got, the louder he would sing it in his little southern drawl. So my parents came in for a visit one day, and it broke my dad's heart. He's out there swinging him. And so he said, "Caleb, have you ever heard about stepdads?" And Caleb's like, "No, what's that?" And so he told him, and he said, "Me and Grandma are going to pray for you as stepdaddy." And so that really intrigued Caleb. He was all about that then. So he changed his song. And from that day on, it was, "My mama's going to buy me a stepdaddy." He thought everything had to be bought, because that's usually the big discussion at our house was, we can't go do that because we don't have the money to do that. So he figured if a stepdaddy was that good, he must cost a lot. So he would sing that. Every day he would sing, "My mama's going to buy me a stepdaddy." Well, at this time, like I told you, everybody's trying to fix you up. They're freaking out because you've been single for a year. Everybody wants to get you happy and all that. My sister lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we talk on the phone, and she'd say, "Have you gone out on a date yet?" I'm like, "No, I had started going me back up. I was in nursing school full time. I worked at Sonic. I had a few other glamorous jobs, I'll tell you real quick. I did ironing for people, which I don't even do for myself now. I played an organ for a church on the weekends. I worked a lot. I didn't have time for a man. And my heart was still hurt. I wasn't very trusting. But at this point, it's been almost a year, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll, if the right one comes along, but I'm going to be very picky. And he's got to be super cute and tall. And nothing less. So my sister said one day, she called me and she's like, "You know what? I have this neighbor that has a brother-in-law." Here we go again. I'm thinking, oh, great. She said, "But he's cute. I'm not just saying this. He's cute. And, he lives in Oklahoma. You live in Arkansas. It's safe. You guys could write letters." That was way before email. It was snail mail. Y'all could exchange addresses, write letters, So I thought, okay, well, send me a picture, because I need a picture first. And so she did, and he was super cute. He had never been married, and he was 26. And she said, "He's a Christian." And I said, okay. So we exchanged addresses. We exchanged pictures. We wrote letters. And then a few weeks went by, and he wants to meet me. When I would go to my sister's house on the weekends a lot. It was just a 3-hour drive. She lived in Broken Arrow, and they had the big Wolf Creek garage sale. If y'all ever heard of that? Well, you have the neighborhood garage sale. Well, they had that, so she said, he'd already asked me on a date, and I'd already said yes. I do not know why I said yes, but I did. I had not met him, just talked to him on the phone. So I had a date with this guy I hadn't met, and she said, well, let's act like we're garage sale shopping, which we've never done before or since. So we go down the street, and he's out in his yard, I'm sure, pretending that he's selling something. I don't even remember. So I got to meet him. I was so nervous. He was very cute. I was just so incredibly nervous. I can't even tell y'all how nervous I was. It had been so long since I had even felt pretty or that anybody would want to date me. So he's coming to pick me up that night, and it was a very interesting evening. What I found out years later is that Mike had been praying for a wife and 2 kids. He started praying this prayer almost the exact day that my husband had walked out on me. And I just happened to have a couple kids. So when he met me, he knew I was the answer to his prayer. Now, it took me a little bit longer to get to that point, but he knew right away. The phone calls got more often. I got roses that week. We had known each other now for 2 or 3 weeks, and he said, why don't I come to Mena and meet your boys? Now, I had protected them. I was not going to be that mom that had boyfriends, and I just didn't want to do that. So I said, well, come to Mena first and get to know my friends and go to church with me, and then we'll think about the boys. He said, okay. So he came to Mena. You got to get this picture. This is pretty funny. He comes to Mena. He has a very nice little red sports car. And he comes to Mena, and I have my friend drive me to meet him at the hotel where he was going to stay, because I knew the bugs were going to be crawling about the time he would pick me up, and I didn't want him to know where I lived. I'm not sure where I thought he would think I lived, because he knew I was pretty poor. We were the talk of the town. First of all, Quita has a date. Shocker. He has an out-of-state license plate. Double shocker. And it's a sports car, third shocker. And they were trying to figure it out. And, of course, I had to take him to Sonic so all the 16-year-old friends of mine could check him out. And get a cherry Coke that I really wasn't even thirsty for, so they could all check him out. He went to church with me, and it was a wonderful weekend. He said, I want to meet the boys. I said, okay. So he said, y'all come to Fort Smith, Arkansas. I'll go to Fort Smith. He was always the perfect gentleman, so he bought a suite for himself and then one for the boys and I. He said, we'll just spend the weekend there and get to know each other, the boys. So I said, okay. I was so nervous about this. And so we left after school on a Friday, and I had a big mommy talk all the way to Fort Smith, which was a good 2 hours. And I said, Caleb, Charlie, this is what we do not say. This is what we do not do. This is Mommy's new friend. And, I had a list. And so we got to Fort Smith, and I wish I could just give y'all a snapshot of my boys peeking out the window trying to see who Mommy's new friend was. And as soon as they met him, it was very sweet, and Mike took us to Denny's right away to eat dinner. So we're sitting there, we've all been together 15 minutes maybe, and Caleb puts his little hand up on Mike's shoulder and starts tapping him. And he said, hey, my mama's going to buy me a tip, Daddy. That was one thing I did not have on my not to-do list. So I immediately felt blood rushing to my face. My heart, my pulse was pounding. And I'm just thinking, oh, God, please, please, please make him stop. Please make him stop. And so Mike heard him and, felt horrified for me because he knew I was dying over there. So he pretended like he didn't hear Caleb. So Caleb just got louder and kept being more persistent. Hey, my mama's going to buy me a tap daddy. And so finally Mike just patted him on the shoulder, and that's all Caleb needed, just to know that he was heard. And I guess that's all Mike needed, because he proposed to me that night. He told me he loved me and proposed to me in the same half hour. So we had known each other 4 weeks, and I was very nervous, and I didn't say yes for a while. I'll just tell you that right now. But he knew, and he shared his heart with me that, I've been praying for you guys for over a year, and you're my family. You're who God has blessed me with. And I'm like, why would you want kids? You're 26, you're handsome, you've never been married. And he said, well, I just knew in my heart that my wife would have a head start on me. So I want to be their dad. So it was very sweet. And we got married shortly after that. We actually knew each other for 6 weeks total. So we got married, and that was in 1990. In 1992, we had our daughter, Stephanie, and she was beautiful just like her brothers. And then in 95, we had Jessica, another beautiful little girl to add to our family. God's been blessing us ever since. And when the girls were little, and I'd say, girls, how us moms can be, I overthought the whole thing. So I'm like, let's have a talk. And so I set the boys down. I'm like, okay, do y'all ever feel like Dad loves the girls more than you? And Charlie was just horrified. He's like, what? I think he likes us the most. And that's how it's always been. I've even had people tell me that the boys look like Mike. So we've been together all these years. We've loved God together. We've loved each other. I am completely in love with my husband, just like Christy said. He is a gift to me, and I can't even say it to where you could fully understand. But ladies, if you have a husband that loves you, treasure that, because there's lots of women who don't, that would love to. And so God blessed me with him. He blessed me with these children, and they're all love God, love Jesus. And the key, because sometimes when I give my talk, people are like, ladies are like, what's your magic? Did you wear this or that? They're wanting to know how to get a guy. And this testimony is not how to find a husband. It's how to lean on God, because he will bring things into your life if you're obedient. If I had not let him work through me, through Sonic, I wouldn't have been where I could be open to the blessings that he would give. Now, one more quick story as I'm closing. When the boys were 18 and 21, which is legal age to decide if they want to be adopted, they put together a whole package. It was a scavenger hunt for Mike, which they've always called him Dad, but they always had a different last name. So they put together this scavenger hunt for him, and at the end of it, it was the day before Father's Day, and at the end of it were adoption papers asking him to adopt them and to take his name. So at 18 and 21, we went in front of the judge, and she was blown away. She said, I've never had adult children want a step-parent to adopt them. So she said, I need to ask you legally why. And so they started sharing their hearts about what an awesome dad he had been, and how much he loved their mom. And there wasn't a dry eye. My words to you tonight are, I'm not God's favorite. He cares about my hurt, but he cares just as much about yours. His plans are for good. No matter where you're at in your life, you may be at the darkest point where you think there's no good plan left. But all during those dark days that I had, there was a plan B that was being facilitated. Those days I couldn't quit crying. Mike was praying for a wife and 2 kids. So the days I would say, God, why are you not listening to me? Why are you not helping me? Because in the natural, I'm car hopping. I've got nothing. But in the supernatural, I had everything. And so I want to leave this with you tonight. Never give up. Never climb into your tunnel. Find yourself people that will help build you up. But always know that just because somebody changes a plan like my ex-husband did, that didn't throw God off the throne and shock him. He knew and had made a way. And, sometimes things don't turn out the way you plan. Sometimes they turn out much better. And just do not get bitter and let God take control. Thank you.